Good evening and welcome to CYC News for the 1st of March 2020 and the 22nd of Amshir 1736 AM. I'm Mira Magdi. In today's headlines, former Egypt President Hosni Mubarak dies aged 91. Israel and Palestinian militants exchange fire as tension escalates. 2 dead after train derailment outside Melbourne. Qantas, Air France and KLM tally up coronavirus costs. Coronavirus outbreak has pandemic potential, but it's not there yet. Manchester City appeals 2-year Champions League ban. But first to Egypt, where ousted Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, who ruled the country with an iron fist for nearly 3 decades, has died, aged 91. Mubarak's son, Alat Mubarak, posted the news on Twitter, using a common Muslim prayer, which said, "Indeed, to Allah we belong and to Allah we shall return. My father, Hosni Mubarak, passed away this morning." During his 29 years in power, Mubarak survived would-be assassins and ill health, crushed a rising Islamist radical movement, and maintained the peace pact with neighbouring Israel that got his predecessor killed. Mubarak was in the intensive care unit at a military hospital in Cairo when he died. The Soviet-trained bomber pilot became one of the leading US allies in the Middle East, receiving tens of billions of dollars in American military aid. His government's continued observance of the Camp David Accords with Israel was also the cornerstone of the so-called Cold Peace between the formerly warring neighbours. But following a January 2011 revolt in Tunisia that launched the Arab Spring uprisings, demonstrators on the streets of Cairo stood up to riot police and the army refused to intercede on his behalf. Mubarak handed over power to a military council that February. After his resignation, Mubarak spent several months on trial, accused to crimes including corruption, abuse of power, and conspiring to kill the protesters who rose up against him. Persecutors had requested that Mubarak be hanged if found guilty, but he was instead sentenced to life in prison. Over to Palestine now, where the Israeli military and Palestinian militants in Gaza exchanged fire last Sunday, hours after a graphic video showing an Israeli army bulldozer scraping the body of a dead man off the ground went viral. According to the Israeli army, militants fired more than 20 rockets at Israel by early Sunday evening, making it the largest single assault by militants on Israel in several months. The army said its Iron Dome aerial defense system intercepted more than half of the launches, with many others landing in open areas. There are no reports of any Israeli injuries from the rockets. Israel said it launched a series of strikes on targets belonging to Islamic Jihad, the smaller of the 2 main militant groups in the region. Islamic Jihad took responsibility of the rocket fire in a statement on its official website, saying its military wing, Saraya al-Quds, is responsible for the shelling. It promised to retaliate against any future aggression. Among the strikes, Israel says it succeeded in hitting a group of Islamic Jihad operatives preparing to launch a fresh barrage of rockets. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said 4 people were being treated in Gaza's Shifa hospital for injuries, though it was not clear whether they were involved in the rocket attacks. Back home to Australia now. And 2 people have died and several more have been injured after a train travelling from Sydney to Melbourne derailed in Victoria last Thursday evening. Paramedics assessed several passengers and airlifted 1 person to a hospital in Melbourne, after being called to the scene at 7:45 p.m. local time. The derailment occurred near the town of Woollan, about 45 kilometres north of Melbourne's CBD. According to operator New South Wales Train Links South, there were around 160 people on board. At least 4 carriages derailed, and the locomotive turned on its side. Keith Pakenham of Country Fire Authority, Victoria said, "It's done some significant damage to the rail line. Most of the passengers are only suffering minor injuries. Our teams were helping evacuate people from the carriages. They've all been walked to a local McDonald's BP station that's been set up a medical staging centre." Passengers posted images on social media showing the carriages twisted and partially overturned amongst trees on the side of the tracks. The train was travelling into Melbourne, according to Victoria Police, which was at the scene alongside other emergency services. The incident caused several disruption on the line, with several trains scheduled to enter or depart Melbourne cancelled. Airlines Qantas, Air France and KLM are taking a big hit from the novel coronavirus. The global airline industry is facing significant financial losses after dozens of carriers cancelled or reduced flight to Asia because of the coronavirus outbreak. Last Thursday, Qantas, the flagship carrier of Australia, reported the coronavirus could reduce its profit by up to $150 million in the second half of its fiscal year. Hours later, Air France KLM said that the virus could slash its earnings by as much as €200 million between February and April. Air France and KLM have suspended flights to Shanghai and Beijing. Qantas has already cancelled its service to Shanghai until the end of May. The airline plans to reduce flights across Asia by 15% until the end of May because of weak demand to Hong Kong, Singapore and Japan. Qantas CEO Alan Joyce said, "We have a lot of flexibility in how we respond. We can extend these cuts, cut deeper if we need to, or add capacity back in." The International Air Transport Association said that its initial assessment showed the coronavirus could cost carriers in Asia nearly $28 billion in lost revenue. To some health news. And the deadly outbreak of the novel coronavirus has the world on edge, but it has not yet developed into a pandemic, according to the World Health Organization. Although the outbreak has been declared a public health emergency of international concern, it has not met the criteria that would classify it as a pandemic when it comes to its geographical spread and impact. The World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said, "Our decision about whether to use the word pandemic to describe an epidemic is based on an ongoing assessment of the geographical spread of the virus, the severity of disease it causes, and the impact it has on the whole society." As of Thursday, over 80,000 people have been infected and more than 2,700 people have died around the world from the outbreak. In January, the World Health Organization declared the situation a public health emergency of international concern and described it as an extraordinary event, which potentially requires a coordinated international response. For a pandemic to be declared, a worldwide spread of the disease, officially called COVID-19, would need to be determined among some other factors. And in sport, Manchester City is appealing against its 2-year ban from European football competitions. The Court of Arbitration for Sport announced on Wednesday City was punished by UEFA, European football's governing body, for serious breaches of club licensing and financial fair play regulations and will not be able to play in the Champions League for 2 seasons. The Swiss-based CAS said it has no time frame on when a verdict will be made following the appeal. The club will also be fined €30 million for contravening UEFA rules that stop clubs overspending. City hosts Real Madrid at Etihad Stadium on Tuesday, March 17, in the second leg of the Champions League round of 16 tie. They hold a 1-0 lead. And that's all for CYC News. A reminder that you can watch this news bulletin again throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Mira Magdi from CYC Studios in Sydney, Australia. Have a good night.